What are you feeling today?
Of what word to use? Let's see.
What words? As long as it's catchy, gets the people going here at the start of the show.
Oh man, put me on the spot.
That's what I do around here.
I love it. You know what? I'm a Falcons fan. Let's do Rise Up. Who cares?
Rise Up. Okay, that can have multiple meanings, so it's all good here. All right, Slumpbuster, episode 47. Rise Up on 3. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Quiet on the set. Make sure my mic is on. Aris, Dre, and Juju dog diving towards the pylon. Go for 2, so damn rude. Recognize authority. Spitting tips for fantasy. No way you're outscoring me. Bold predictions with conviction every single day. Sports addiction, no restriction. Kicking game like Pele. He's the greatest. What's the basis? Pick an athlete. Let's debate this game. Outrageous trading places. Sudden death. Take 10 paces. Turn and shoot. Boys the truth. Mamba mentality. Future greats take their place. Dreams become reality. Low and outside, knocked it out the park. Your boy discovered fire like a rock with a spark. Refs acting like Neanderthals. Phantom flags, nothing calls. Heartbreak losses, tragic falls. Every week discuss it all. Settle in, listen up. Free your time like Andrew Luck. Show's about to start. I suggest you buckle up.
Rise up.
Rise up.
Rise up.
Alrighty, guys, it's time for another episode of the Slumpbuster Podcast. I'm your host, Juju Talk Sports. I'm joined by the fantasy Aristotle himself, Aris Blakeney. And coming on to the podcast today from the RotoBros Fantasy Football Podcast, Chris McConnell. Welcome in, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Always a pleasure to have guests who talk about the stuff we love, and we certainly love fantasy football around here. Chris, I do have one question for you before we get into the minutia, the breakdowns, everything that people need to know going into this fantasy football season. So it's been a pleasure having you on Facebook, but I did have one question for you about one of your more controversial takes here.
Yeah.
So you liked Arya killing the Night King?
I did love that. That was, to me, I have gone on record to say that moment was the greatest moment in television history. My favorite show of all time. So maybe that's part of it. She was my favorite character. So that probably adds a little bit of bias into it. But, man, I was just screaming like a schoolgirl when that happened. So I was beyond excited.
I got to tell you, though, man, they did my boy Jono wrong at the end of that show.
I've heard that more than once.
I mean, the whole story, right? They're telling us John's the guy. And then just in the last 3 episodes, the Night King, okay, so if you're going to tell me that he's not going to get anything, he's going to get sent beyond the wall, right? My thought is, could you at least give him the Night King kill? Give him something. So, it's
I can agree with that. I think they could have probably given the King of the North a little bit more. I can agree with that. It did not go – Season 8 did not go without its issues. I'm less critical, but my biggest thing was I feel like they just kind of rushed it. I don't need 7 or 8 hour-and-a-half-long episodes. Give me 15 30-minute episodes if it means that I get all the closure that I want and all the storylines get to finish the way that most people wanted them to finish. So that would be my only change, which I guess is a pretty big change. But
meanwhile, Aris is on here, and I know for a fact he didn't watch Game of Thrones, so he's just kind of
that's a lie.
What? You didn't watch it?
I watched it. I was smart. I didn't start from the beginning because I was poor and didn't have HBO. So right before season 8 started, I actually have a decent job now, so I have HBO now. So I binged the whole thing, so I didn't have to wait 17 years for that final season. And honestly, Grey Worm's my favorite. I loved Grey Worm. He was my favorite character of the whole thing. So I feel like his ending was decent, that he went to the Queen's her handmaid and her right-hand lady or whatever. She went back to her homeland. So it was a decent ending.
In the books, that's actually an interesting ending because, and I haven't read the books, but I'm friends with a ton of people who have. But apparently in the books, there's a big disease that wipes out the entire island or something like that. Yeah. So it's interesting that they decided to go back there because now they're probably dead. But
well, people running into diseases, we know all about it. For their
we're living through it right now, right?
All right. Well, guys, I think we can transition from one of the better fantasy shows of all time to fantasy football, fantasy sports. I'm ready for the season. Now, Chris, one of the big things I kind of wanted to touch on here. So what's kind of your general draft philosophy? If I'm in a draft room with Chris McConnell on draft day, what is the strategy you utilize? Are you one of those zero RB truthers? Are you a zero wide receiver guy? Are you best available, positional needs? How do you go about your philosophy on draft day?
Well, I think it actually there's some gray area there because it's all dependent, all right? Okay, so there's a lot of in a traditional 1 QB league that's not super flex or 2 QB, you're pretty much going to see people taking running backs first. Maybe they'll throw in a wide receiver first, something along those lines. But for me, I think I don't have a set strategy necessarily. I don't go into it saying I am going to take this player or this position first. I am going to do this throughout the draft. If this guy does this, I'm going to do this. I don't go into it like that because I'm afraid that people go into these drafts and they say, you know what, 0 RB for the first 6 rounds, okay, before I take a running back. And I think you're at that point, you're kind of pigeonholing yourself into a strategy and assuming that it's going to work and assuming that that is going to be your best pathway to success in the draft before it even begins. And I think that's always a problem. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself into a strategy. If the draft board dictates that you are to take a running back in the 2nd round or the 3rd round, then take a running back in the 2nd or 3rd round. If it dictates a wide receiver first or a wide receiver in the 2nd or 3rd, take a wide receiver first. So I think you just really, a lot of people decide, oh, I'm just going to go best player available, period. And I commend that and I get that. But at the same time, you do want to have a little bit of strategy, but you don't want to pigeonhole yourself, like I said, into a single strategy. So I really caution people to not go into their draft saying, oh, I'm going to go 0 wide receiver or 0 RB, or I'm not going to take a quarterback, or I'm going to take a quarterback in the 4th round so that I guarantee I get the best one. I just don't think that that's the way to do it. To me, draft accordingly, draft according to what the board dictates, and go from there. Now, if you want to say the first couple rounds, if you want to say, oh, I'm going to go running back, that's fine, because then it's early enough to where you're getting 2 great players regardless. And you can say, well, I'm going to stack it running back, and then I'll figure everything else out as the draft goes on. That's fine, because you're getting 2 great players at running back at a very important position in fantasy, at least, and you're probably going to get production out of those 2 barring an injury. So that's okay, but you don't want to go through the whole draft with a single strategy because, again, you are pigeonholing yourself. Before you even know what the board's going to look like, you've already made up your mind on what you're going to do, and that's just never really the smart thing to do. So I always caution people to kind of not make up their mind before they have to.
In terms of preparation, how many mocks do you think you probably do yourself to get ready for an average draft? A little different because obviously you're in the industry of fantasy football. What would you say is an appropriate amount? When do you think people should start mocking to get a more realistic idea? Because we know there's a lot of fluidity in mock drafts. If I drafted now, for example, let's say Kerryon Johnson is still up there on boards or still higher up in the ADP because people haven't completely crashed on him. But as we get closer to training camp, let's say Matt Patricia says that it's literally going to be a 20% timeshare come the NFL season between all the backs they have there currently in Detroit. Do you think that month of May, month of June, this is kind of a time where you don't really get a good read? You can start doing it if you want, just get in practice, but you're spinning your wheels in the dirt.
This is obviously not a normal offseason, guys, right? Because coronavirus is going all around, and they haven't even opened facilities yet. They've just reported today they're going to do that on May 19th, that teams can begin opening facilities on May 19th if they choose. So this is not obviously a normal offseason, but hypothetically, let's say this was a normal offseason. Rookies are getting there in their mini camps. You've got the OTAs. So you're getting this face-to-face practice time with your teammates, with your new coaches. If you're learning a new system, learning a new playbook, normally, okay, not this offseason, but normally it may not be that bad to go ahead and do a couple early mocks. But again, people always have to realize there are going to be injuries. Somebody is going to tear their ACL in training camp. Somebody's going to tear their ACL in OTAs or in their workouts in shorts, in the middle of May and June. It's going to happen. People are going to get injured, and boards are going to change, rankings are going to change, and things are going to shift. And you've got to be prepared for that. So if you're doing something, I think, right now, especially when teams aren't even on the field, you're really not getting the best feel that you absolutely could. It's not going to kill you, obviously. Knowledge is power. So the more knowledge you get, the more practice you get, the better off you're going to be. And I completely understand that. And I commend everybody for wanting to do that. But at the same time, you also have to realize this is a different season, right? I mean, there's a lot of differences, at least for the 2020 summer. And so you got to kind of take that into account. So I think this year, people would be smarter to do more mock drafting closer to training camp in July, okay? And now you're going to have to obviously fit a lot of mock drafting in a short amount of time, especially for somebody that does it a lot. But I think that's probably going to be the best thing to do, because a lot of these rookies, again, training camp is going to be where they have to learn quick. Like, they're not going to have mini camps. They're not going to have OTAs, right? So they're going to have these virtual meetings that they're doing and all that. But that's just learning the playbook and learning team philosophy and locker room etiquette that they want in there from the coaches. So they're not on the field. They're not running plays. And so, they can get out and practice and things like that. But that's the extent of it. So the rookies this year, a lot of people are concerned, especially in dynasty leagues, that these rookies are going to have a big learning curve. And so we're not going to have as many breakout rookies this year. I won't go that far, but it is definitely going to affect some things. So I think, to answer the question, I think most people should play it smarter and probably do it toward the end of June, early July, before training camp starts, and just try to fit a ton of mock drafting in there. That way they can get the most accurate feel for it. And of course, again, even in July, people are going to get hurt. It's just the way it is. Preseason, people are going to get hurt. So you can continue to do mocks up until then, up until, week 1. But I guess it's never too early to start, to tell you the truth, but to get the most accurate read on some of these players and the situations that they're in, like DeAndre Swift and Kerryon Johnson, you may want to wait a little bit longer until DeAndre Swift is able to get some more of this playbook under his feet and learn a little bit more of it.
Yeah, so I want to piggyback off of you were talking about the injuries. Chargers a couple of years ago had Hunter Henry tear his ACL on the first day of conditioning. Totally screwed up a lot of draft boards there. But we'll go from mock drafts to the actual draft. When do you feel like that sweet spot is? Do you think it's like right around National Draft Day? Typically, all of my drafts will be like right after the third preseason game is when we'll start to draft. When do you typically like to do your drafts?
Well, so the thing to know about me is that I'm a big Dynasty guy. Dynasty is life for me. It's been, going on 16 years now. I started in a 16-team Dynasty, huge rosters, 16-team Dynasty League on myfantasyleague.com. And so I started that in 05, and so been doing it ever since. So Dynasty is really my forte, but I like to be in some keeper leagues and be in some redraft leagues just to kind of keep the knowledge fresh and to keep everything, I guess, up to date in my head as far as strategy for all three sort of formats. But so Dynasty leagues, normally my first draft is usually a couple days after the NFL draft. But for redraft leagues, the traditional redraft 1 QB leagues, it's typically late June, early July. A lot of them are also late July after training camp ends, between training camp and preseason. But a lot of people like to wait to get the most accurate feel. Like I was just mentioning, most people like to wait until the third preseason game, because the third preseason game, you're going to have your most impactful players on the field, right? They're going to play 3.5 quarters of that preseason game, and then the fourth game they don't play at all. So that's where that fourth game they have no chance of getting hurt. A lot of people like to get through 3 weeks of preseason to know that they're not going to get hurt. And I'll give you a good example. When Darius Geis was coming out of LSU, got drafted by the Redskins, he looked really good in preseason for the short amount of time he was there, but then he went down with a knee injury, tore his ACL, was out for the year. So that was, I don't know if that was the second or third preseason game, but had you done your draft in early July, assuming you were going to have Darius Geis all year, guess what? You didn't get to have him that year, right? And so that's one of the things. A lot of people, especially in redraft leagues, they definitely want to wait, because in dynasty leagues, you can stash a guy in the IR and have him for next year, and that's fine. And even sometimes in keeper leagues as well. But redraft leagues, you're not keeping anybody. So you got one shot here. So I think for redraft leagues, the sweet spot is after the third preseason game. That's where I think all your redrafts should really start to draft, if you want to avoid the possibility of injuries and things of that nature.
Now, you mentioned a interesting thing about the COVID pandemic in terms of how it will affect rookies. And another thought that came to my mind just now was, what about free agents? Players that went to a new organization, a new scheme. I know you probably haven't really gotten around to really doing the final rankings for yourself just yet. But with that said, are you fading guys knowing that they're in a new situation this coming year?
Yeah, there are certain guys, and there are free agents that there are guys that are on teams right now that they might get traded. They could still get cut. There are guys in free agency that just they haven't signed yet because of the COVID-19 pandemic, because teams can't test their health. They can't put them through a physical and everything and workouts. And Cam Newton is one of those. Devontae Freeman's another one. I mean, it's littered with guys out there that are talented that in any normal offseason they would already have jobs. Devontae Freeman would have a job. Cam Newton would obviously have a job. I think he'll wind up in Jacksonville or Washington when all is said and done. He's not going to be a free agent when preseason games kick off, and probably not even training camp for that matter. But once teams are able to put players through physical workouts and things like that again, like they normally would, I think you're going to start seeing a lot, an uptick in these free agent signings. But guys like O.J. Howard, tight end for the Bucs, now that Gronk's there, yeah, it's nice to have 3 quality tight ends with Gronk and O.J. and Cameron Brate, but you don't need it. Why are you wasting money on a backup tight end if you don't need it? So get some draft capital for O.J. Howard. You got a better player in Rob Gronkowski anyway. Okay, ship him off and get something in return for him and save some money on a position or a player that's a little bit more, integral to the entire operation on offense. So, or defense for that matter. But Leonard Fournette's another one. There was a lot of talk about him maybe being traded at draft time. Unfortunately, the way the running back landscape looks around the league right now, there's no open spots. Nobody's gotten hurt yet. That's another thing that's hurt Devontae Freeman. Yeah, you could put him through a physical and he's probably healthy right now, but even if you could, is there a team that's going to sign him? I think a couple teams may have some openings for some competition, but there is no clear workhorse or not even a workhorse role. There's no clear starting role anywhere in the league now that we're post-draft, because all the teams that need a running back pretty much filled that need for the most part. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for teams that are being affected by this coronavirus pandemic that normally in a normal offseason would have already signed a player, would have normally already traded a player or traded for a player. I think that's really holding up a lot of stuff. So it's not just rookies that it's affecting. You're absolutely right. It's affecting free agents, and it's affecting guys that are still on teams who may not be playing for that same team when the season kicks off, or even come mid-season, actually.
So you kind of touched on the trade candidate guys like O.J. Howard, Leonard Fournette. So in my rankings and when I'm drafting, I'll try to stay away from those guys because there's too much uncertainty. So how do you handle those guys, especially Leonard Fournette? He's a clear talent. Like, he's a really good football player, but the situation might not be good, and we don't know where he's going to end up. We don't know if he's going to end up in, say Denver, where now there's 3 running backs down there. So how do you go about those guys when you're either ranking or drafting?
It is absolutely funny that you mentioned that, because I just tweeted out just a little bit ago that I'm about to go on a Leonard Fournette binge because I am all over Leonard Fournette. I'm going to tell you why. For much of the same reason I was on him last year and a lot of people were selling on him. I'm like, look, he's healthy right now, okay? And it's another reason why I'm all in on James Conner this year. Leonard Fournette was healthy last year going into the season. There's nobody on offense that's going to get that work. It was all Leonard Fournette. He didn't have TJ Yeldon backing him up anymore, so he was going to get all the pass catches, okay? He was going to get all the rushing work, all right? And he was the focal point of the offense. And I don't care what anybody says. DJ Chark is nice. Laviska Shenault's a good draft pick. You sign Tyler Eifert at tight end. That's great. But Leonard Fournette is still going to be the focal point of that offense, guys. And, he's healthy coming into the offseason again. Now, if he stays in Jacksonville, that to me is the best thing for him from a fantasy perspective, because he'll be the focal point. Even if he were to get traded to, let's say, Tampa, where a lot of people assume that that's just a great landing spot for him, I don't think it actually would be, because you've got Ronald Jones, who they haven't given up on yet. You just drafted Keyshawn Vaughn pretty high. So it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, and he would be getting actually less work than he would if he were to stay in Jacksonville. So I'm crossing my fingers for fantasy purposes that Leonard Fournette stays in Jacksonville. He was RB7. He finished RB7 in PPR last year. He could do that again. I think he's absolutely top 10 to 12 running back. He's absolutely an RB1 if he stays healthy and he stays in Jacksonville. So I'm all over him. I get it. People are concerned about injuries, but I think a lot of times people will worry a little too much about injuries. James Conner is another one that people are avoiding, but just today, Mike Tomlin came out and told everybody, I'm a feature back coach. I want a feature back. James Conner's the feature back. James Conner's 25 years old. And before last year, he didn't really have an injury problem. And not only that, he wasn't working with Big Ben last year. So when he was on the field, nobody was scared of Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges throwing the football, right? So they didn't have a passing game for anybody to worry about. They were keying keying in on James Conner in the running game. That's not going to be the case this year. He's going to be behind a good offensive line. He's a 25-year-old workhorse running back. He's healthy again. He's got Big Ben coming back. All the signs point to James Conner, having a great fantasy season. So I'm all in on James Conner and guys like Leonard Fournette. So I look at the injuries and I pay attention to them and I don't discount them. But at the same time, you can't make that your Bible. You cannot live by injuries. A.J. Green's another one. I'm not selling A.J. Green. I'm buying A.J. Green. So most of the time, I'm not going to let injuries, as long as the guy's coming into the season healthy, I'm not going to let injuries make up my decisions.
And I'll piggyback, too, on your Leonard Fournette take there. So you mentioned 7th overall in PPR, 76 receptions. Public perception on Leonard Fournette is that he's just a between-the-tackles runner. But this guy has really developed as a 3-down back. So whether he's in Jacksonville or wherever he goes, I think he definitely is going to fall within that high-end running back 1 range. Certainly because obviously there's a lot of fluidity in terms of the running back position in fantasy. So right. I did want to kind of touch on that. So everyone's number 1, undisputed number 1, run CMC, right? Obviously.
I don't know. I'm still a Barkley truther. I think I'm still taking Barkley, right? But I will not argue with anybody taking CMC because let me tell you something. Everybody's worried, or not worried, but everybody's concerned, well, how will new coach Matt Rule's Baylor offense, coming into Carolina? Well, I'm telling you, you go look at Baylor's offense. That offense revolved around the run. I mean, they threw the ball, but it revolved around the running back. So this is a good thing for Christian McCaffrey. So look, McCaffrey, Barkley, 1, 2, any order. I don't care. I won't argue. I think personally, I'll still probably go Barkley just because I love the Giants offense this year. But regardless, both of them are great picks in the top 2.
Yeah, and I bring that up just because, the amount of running backs that have actually finished number 1 back-to-back years has been very limited. There's only been Todd Gurley in 2017, 2018, and then LaDainian Thomas in 06, 07. Right. Generally, those number 1 running backs, I've kind of looked over the last, 12 years, will fall anywhere from around 11.9 in that general range. Now, CMC, I think he's still going to be a top 5 just because the amount of target volume he receives.
Totally agree, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to keep him above water regardless, barring any major injury. But with that said, so aside from CMC, generally only about 1 running back will return out of the top 5 each year. So last year's top 5 running backs were McCaffrey, Jones, Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott, and Dalvin Cook. Out of that top 5 running backs from last year, who are you most worried about?
I think I'm most worried about Aaron Jones, actually. I wouldn't be as worried about him if they didn't have A.J. Dillon. And here's the thing. On the RotoBros podcast, I do this series every offseason that runs through pretty much January from where the Senior Bowl is all the way to April in the draft. So about 4 or 5 months, I do this series called Scouting Briefs. And we do 20, 30-minute episodes breaking down film and attributes and gameplay of specific players in the draft that people want to know about to kind of get you a little more familiar. I'm not a fan of A.J. Dillon. I'm not a fan of A.J. Dillon between the 20s, okay? But inside the 20s, that is where I think he is going to pose a problem to Aaron Jones. And I say that because Aaron Jones tied for the league lead last year in rushing touchdowns with 16, okay? He was tied for the league lead in total touchdowns with Christian McCaffrey. But with Derrick Henry, he's tied for the league lead in rushing touchdowns last year with 16. And so I think that number is going to go down. A.J. Dillon, to me, again, between the 20s is not a player that I want. But inside the 20s, in the red zone, yeah, I'm going to want to get him involved. He's a big, strong running back. He's a battering ram. He's stronger. He's bigger than Aaron Jones. So he's that battering ram, that bus, if you will, to kind of drive through the tight holes in the red zone. And so that, I think, Aaron Jones' touchdown equity is going to go down, and he's going to have some touchdown regression from that. So he's the guy I'm most worried about. I think Eckler can repeat. I think McCaffrey can compete. I think Barkley's going to be back in there. I don't think Dalvin is going to be – well, Dalvin, I guess, was RB6. Derrick Henry was RB5. I don't expect Derrick or Dalvin to be in the top 5, but I could certainly see Alvin Kamara back in that top 5, who had sort of what you would think is a down year, finishing as RB9 in PPR. So I think Joe Mixon, I think right now is in my top 5, and I think Ezekiel Elliott probably still finishes in the top 5 as well. So I think there are going to be 2 or 3 names that drop from that list, but I mean, they're all going to be great options. I think for the most part, though, I'm selling on Aaron Jones in Dynasty, redraft, all that. I'm selling on him because I just think that you can get better options later. You in Dynasty League, sell Aaron Jones, get a lot of draft capital, and get another proven running back. Maybe you can get like Miles Sanders in a second, or maybe even like Miles Sanders in a first round. Just some type of example that you could get. But I do think A.J. Dillon's going to pose a problem to his touchdowns.
That actually brings me to the next point, and I should clarify. So I was looking at half-point PPR as far as when I listed that top 5 right there. But in terms of the number 1 overall finishers on the next year, indicator I was looking at was where did they finish the previous year to their breakout season. So, and that typical range was about running back 16. In that range this year, going into the season, we have Miles Sanders, Kenyan Drake, and Le'Veon Bell. Now, when I list those names, which of those guys do you think, and I think you probably already played your cards when mentioning Sanders here, is more likely to fall in the top 5 this year?
Well, actually, while I like Miles Sanders, I do, and I think he's on a good offense. I don't think they're going to have like Boston Scott as involved and Corey Clement, as guys like that. I think Corey Clement is actually gone now, but Boston Scott as involved. I don't, even if they bring back LaShawn McCoy, I think Miles Sanders is obviously going to be the workhorse, but it's definitely not going to be Le'Veon Bell. I think Le'Veon Bell could get some work. I think he has one rock star season left in him as a lead workhorse running back. I don't know if it'll be this year or not. We'll see, but I'm telling you, Kenyan Drake, guys, if out of those 3 names, Kenyan Drake is the guy that I'm absolutely all over. He's an RB1 for me. I think I probably have him right now in the RB 10 to 11 range. But I do think he's in that top 12, making him an RB1 in PPR. That offense is perfect for him. He's finally going to be the lead dog. He's going to be the workhorse. We saw what he did last year when they traded for him. And, when David Johnson got hurt, we saw what he did toward the end of the year. And it was pretty spectacular how involved he was in the offense. And so his targets were good. He had, at least 6 targets in a lot of games. You can look at his games against Cleveland on the ground, Seattle on the ground, back-to-back weeks. He had 4 touchdowns and 137 yards rushing against Cleveland, 166 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns against Seattle. And then, of course, he had 12 attempts, 60 yards, and another touchdown on 3 catches against the Rams to close out the year. So Kenyan Drake, for me, in this offense, I think is going to be one hell of a weapon, and I'm excited for that, and I think he's absolutely going to be an RB1. As long as he's healthy, he should have 0 problems being an RB1, and out of those 3 names, I think he is the one that's most likely to be a top 5 running back in 2020.
How do you maneuver around the running back by committees or the crowded backfields? I'll give you some examples. Denver, I feel like those 2 running backs are just going to devour each other. They're going to eat into each other's workload. You have the Ravens. Granted, they're a run-first team, but I don't know how they're going to use their 6 running backs on the roster right now. Yeah. Plus, you have Lamar Jackson eating rushing yards and rushing attempts from them as well. So how do you kind of go around those running back by committees when either drafting or rankings?
So, look, I love volume. That's the number one thing for me is volume. Are you going to get volume? Aaron Jones got the volume. Leonard Fournette got the volume. For the most part, Nick Chubb got the volume before Kareem Hunt came back and ruined that. So guys with the volume, they're going to get opportunities, and that's what I look for. Ezekiel Elliott, obviously. This year, Austin Eckler. He might have more volume this year than he did last year with not having Melvin Gordon to worry about. So
wait there. Chargers running back number 1 overall. We can end the podcast right there. Let's go ahead and get out of here on that.
There we go.
He said it. Chargers best. Let's go.
Hey, it wouldn't surprise me if Eckler finishes RB1. It just would not. There's no reason. He finishes RB4 last year, and that was with Melvin Gordon in the mix for a good amount of the year. So there's no reason to think that he can't do it. But guys with volume, Alvin Kamara is going to get volume this year. Obviously, Saquon Barkley is going to get his volume. Chris Carson with Rashad Penny, he's going to start the year on the PUP list. So Chris Carson, at least for the first 8-9 weeks, he's going to be bombs away. So guys with volume is what I look for. I'm not going to look to draft guys like Mark Ingram. I was all over Mark Ingram last year as the workhorse guy in a run-heavy offense. I get it. But you're right. Sharing with J.K. Dobbins, J.K. he's very talented. He's going to be heavily involved, okay? He's the heir apparent to Mark Ingram there. Mark Ingram is going to be involved. Justice Hill, a little bit, but Justice Hill's not even going to be fantasy relevant, in my opinion. And then, of course, the biggest factor is Lamar Jackson taking those carries away. So I'm not going to be in on guys like that. James White is a guy that I think could get a lot of opportunities, but I also think Damian Harris is going to be more heavily involved this year. So you've got Harris, you've got Burkhead, you've got Michelle, and you've got James White. If I want one of those guys as my 3rd running back, on my team, starting in my lineup, I can deal with that. But I'm looking for volume in my top 2 spots. Joe Mixon's another one. Could be splitting a little bit with Giovanni Bernard, but it's not going to be enough to alarm anybody. So guys like that, I think Todd Gurley is a guy that I think people need to look at. I'm not just saying that because I'm a Falcons fan. Ito Smith is not going to be a threat We saw Todd Gurley. He's coming off a 12 touchdown, 15 total touchdown, a 12 touchdown season, okay? And we saw him. He was an animal on the goal line. That's not going to change with Atlanta, a team that's going to be near the goal line a lot because their offense is great and they're going to score a lot of points. Ito Smith's not going to be eating into that. Kadri Ellison is not going to be eating into that. So guys with volume. Now, look, I love Phillip Lindsay. He's one of my favorite players in the league. He's one of my favorite players in fantasy. He's a draft darling of mine because I called him before anybody else did coming out of the draft. But I'm not going to trust him to be near, where he was. I don't think he'll probably be at RB19 is where he finished last year. He could be, but I do think Melvin Gordon's going to be more heavily involved than what Royce Freeman was last year. And I think that Phillip Lindsay's probably going to be shifting a little bit more toward being that main pass catcher. But I think they're going to work in tow together. But again, he's not a guy that I want as a top 2 running back for me. Last year, sure. With no Melvin Gordon, absolutely. In 2020, with Melvin Gordon in tow, no thanks. So, again, the number one thing I look for is volume. I want you to be healthy, and I want you to have volume. James Conner's, he's going to get the volume. David Montgomery is a nice buy low running back I like this year. He's going to get the volume. I don't want a part of Ronald Jones and Keyshawn Vaughn. I don't. Everybody's, flipping out over I don't want Keyshawn Vaughn. He's going to get too many of his opportunities taken away from Ronald Jones, and maybe if they add a guy like Devontae Freeman, that won't help matters either. So, those committees I'm just not really a huge fan of. I try to steer clear of them as much as I can because they're going to have committee. That doesn't mean I'm selling on Nick Chubb, but Nick Chubb is definitely not going to be as attractive going into this year as he was last year. That's for sure.
Interesting point there is one thing that I've always been raised on is fantasy football is based on 2 things: talent versus opportunity. So there's some guys that make their living on opportunity. They're just going to get 20 touches a game. They're going to be that Adrian Peterson type. They can run into a brick wall 20 times a game. And then there's guys like Tyler Lockett who can take 3 targets and manage to make that into like a 20-point day for you. So like, how do you evaluate those guys? Or like even like Aris brought up committees. So like the Niners committee last year, Raheem Mostert, Breida, Coleman. It was a tough committee to navigate for the most part up until like Mostert really took control there. You would say that that's not the most opportunity-rich situation, but if you hit on it because those guys are talented, or at least their offensive line is talented, you could really benefit from it. Certainly win a league.
Here's how I navigate it. I don't. Well, even with Matt Breida gone, I'm going to avoid Raheem Mostert right now. I will wait. If I want to acquire a guy in a committee that is proving it, I will do it before the playoff run. Because even if they're having a good, first 5-6 weeks, why am I going to go trade for a guy in week 6? Just because he had 4 or 5 good weeks to start the season, I'm not going to trade for a guy in week 6 because by the time week 9, 10 gets here, we're entering in, playoff fight mode to try to make the playoffs. He might not be as involved. So I'm going to wait on, more committee backs like Raheem Mostert, and even guys like Matt Breida for that matter, because Matt Breida and Jordan Howard are going to split the rock. Jordan will be the starter. He'll be the early down guy. Breida will deal with a lot of the pass catching, I think. But for one guy to take over, I'm not going to do that until I know that they are getting hot at the right time, not to start the season off, because I don't care about that. I would rather acquire a guy in a committee that has just started to turn things on, that's had 3, 4, 5 good weeks in a row closer to playoff time. It might cost me a little bit more, but if it ends up winning me a championship, it's all worth it in the end anyway. But yes, it's just I'm going to focus on the guys that have volume. So in redraft leagues, I want all the David Johnson, for instance. He's healthy. He's on what should be a decent offense, even without DeAndre Hopkins, should be a decent offense, and he's going to be a workhorse this year. So what's not to like about David Johnson? Still in his 20s, what's not to like about David Johnson? I will take David Johnson because he's going to get that work. So if my top 3 running backs are Leonard Fournette, James Conner, and David Johnson, I am on the moon about how thrilled I am about that. So Devin Singletary is an interesting one up there in Buffalo. With Zach Moss, we know Zach Moss is going to be involved. They took him in the 3rd round. He's going to be involved early on in the season. Now, Devin might still be the starter, okay? But it wouldn't surprise me if Devin ends up being more of a change of pace runner when Zach Moss ends up starting some games close to playoff time and is the guy, in the red zone or on early downs. So that's the sort of thing I would kind of wait to sort of feel out. I'll take a guy like Zach Moss late because he doesn't cost a thing, but Devin Singletary, I'm probably going to be avoiding in my redraft leagues, okay? He's a hold in Dynasty, but in redraft, I'm probably going to avoid him because there's so much uncertainty there. So I'm not going to spend significant early draft capital on a guy that I don't know anything about. I would rather wait, analyze the situation at around mid-season or toward a couple weeks before playoff time, and then make a decision to maybe pay for a little bit more to get a guy that's red hot because I want that in the playoffs.
This is a message brought to you by the Foundation for a Perfect Package.
Why do I need Manscaped?
Why do I need Manscaped?
Why do I need Manscaped?
Because the only frill I want is the one up top.
Because being in a relationship is not an excuse to be lazy.
Because I like talking ball, not smelling like them.
Because deforestation is proven to prevent forest fires.
Manscaped is the only brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming.
Manscaped's Crop Preserver guarantees that you smell your best all day long.
Manscaped Boxer Briefs are the most comfortable underwear on the market.
Manscaped's advanced skincare technology makes nicks a thing of the past.
Manscaped is the #1 in men's grooming. Subscribers get 2 free blade refills every 3 months. Get 20% off plus free shipping and handling with the promo code SLUMP at manscaped.com. That's the promo code SLUMP at manscaped.com. Get your Lawnmower 3.0 today.
We are the Slumpbusters.
And we approve this message.
So we'll kind of switch gears from like the top of the line guys. We'll go towards the end of the draft. We're not going to talk like the last two because you should take a kicker and a defense there. You shouldn't really reach on those guys. But in those later rounds, are you looking more for like boom potential later on in the season or like a handcuff, or are you just taking shots on guys that you think are going to be, pay off either in the first couple and you can use them as trade bait? Like how do you work those later rounds of the draft?
I think for the later rounds is a little bit subjective. Obviously, it depends on who and what is there. Situation is something that I look a lot at. There's I saw a tweet today from somebody who was talking about they were in a startup, deep redraft league, I think, and they were talking about why is Dare Ogunbowale? You ever heard that name before? Maybe not. Dare Ogunbowale not being talked about for Tampa. Okay, the third string running back for Tampa. He's not a great runner of the football between the tackles. He's a pass catcher. There's a reason that Dare Ogunbowale is not being talked about because last year it was just him and Ronald Jones. Peyton Barber was there a little bit, but he was the guy that had the ability or the opportunity, I should say, rather, to step up and be that main pass catcher and make a huge difference for that offense. He didn't do it. And this is on a team that throws the ball a lot. Right? He was a guy going into last year. I was like, man, situation looks good for Dare Ogunbowale. He might be a guy you want to target late. He didn't do anything with it last year. Why should I think he's going to do anything this year? So I saw that tweet today, and I'm like, well, there's a reason that nobody's buying Dare Ogunbowale. But not only that, but Keyshawn Vaughn's in town. So that's less work that Dare is going to get anyway. Guys like that, I think you got to be really careful on. Dion Lewis is another guy for the Giants. He's not going to get a whole lot of work. You can get him basically for free. Probably not even going to go draft in a lot of leagues. But he's a guy you don't want to touch because Barkley's just going to get the majority of the work anyway. And even if Barkley were to go down, Dion's not going to be the every down workhorse anyway. He's not a guy to spend some time on. But a guy like maybe Chris Thompson, just signed in Jacksonville. Maybe he takes some of the pass catching opportunities away from Leonard Fournette if he can stay healthy. He's had a problem with that before. So there are guys like that. Brian Hill for Atlanta. I don't think he's going to have a lot of opportunity. There's 4 backs there that are going to get some work. Talk about navigation. It's a tough thing to navigate these later rounds. I like to look at situation. Guys in good situations that I can look at and say, hey, he might get some solid value. Frank Gore just signed with the Jets. Le'Veon Bell is going to take the majority of the work. But if I can get some cheap touchdowns in the red zone from Frank Gore, okay, at this point in his career, that's what he's best at in the short yardage and red zone. I'll take that all day long at the very, last 3-4 rounds. I'll be happy to take those cheap touchdowns. I'm not going to take a chance on a guy, like Bo Scarborough for Detroit. I'm not going to do that. There's no point. He's not going to get the work. So I think you really got to be careful. People really got to be careful with who they go with. Don't go with a guy just because you like him. Look at the situation. Look at what the opportunity is likely to be like. But there are definitely some late round guys. And I'll be honest with you, a guy that I've been targeting in the late rounds who's not even on a team is Devontae Freeman. Who's to say that Devontae Freeman doesn't go to Tampa Bay, okay, on a cheap 1-year prove-it deal? Who's to say that he doesn't go to Chicago, okay, and ruin, all of us David Montgomery truthers' dreams, right? He's a guy that I'm drafting toward the very end of the draft because I'm willing to hold him. I'm willing to allow him to take up a roster spot for me just to see where he goes, right? If he goes to Detroit, I'm not going to be interested. I'll cut him. because you got Swift, you got Kerryon Johnson, but he's probably not going to go to a place like that anyway. He's going to go to a place where he's going to get work. It would not surprise me if he went to San Francisco to replace Matt Breida. That's another option. They keep that, 3-4 back rotation going, which, you guys obviously express your disdain already for that. But I think a guy like Josh Kelly or Justin Jackson late. Yeah, Austin Eckler's going to get a lot of the work, but what if Austin goes down? What about early down work? What about red zone work? Justin Jackson and Josh Kelly are guys that you can get in the later rounds that could end up having some solid value while you're fighting for a playoff spot.
Well, for the record, as a Niners fan, I actually didn't mind the Niners committee. I hated it from a fantasy owner's perspective. Can't be as bad as Belichick, though. Belichick, he'll take a guy that was literally just, on the practice squad and make him a touchdown. Yeah, exactly. The fact that Brandon Bolden is just still in touchdowns to this day just kind of tells you everything you need to know about Bill Belichick.
It does. It really does.
Yeah, let me kind of transition here into this thought. So where you live and breathe here, Dynasty. So I've actually been listening to your series as far as some of the rookies over the last couple of days. Listen to your DeAndre Swift, listen to your Brandon Ayuk takes. We'll kind of go through this running backs and receivers respectively. We'll focus primarily here on the first round wide receivers. So you talk about situation.
Oh, baby. I love the first round wide receivers.
Ruggs, Lamb, Judy, Justin Jefferson, Ayuk, Rager. So we have,
that's insane.
Yeah, so 6 wide receivers taken in the first round. Which of those guys ended up in the best place?
Well, I'll be honest with you. One of the guys that's my favorite, that it's probably going to end up, in my opinion, as rookie wide receiver 1 in fantasy, didn't even go in the first round. That's Michael Pittman. I could go on a rant about him. But as far as the first round wide receivers, to me, I love the spot for all of these guys. Brandon Ayuk, as a Niners fan, you've got to be jumping for joy if you watch his tape. The guy is just a dynamic force. I'm in love with the guy. I think he's huge. Henry Ruggs, he's going to get a ton of work in Las Vegas. Jalen Reagor is going to get a ton of work in Philadelphia. He's on a great offense. Michael Pittman's on a great – Justin Jefferson's on a great offense. Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb. It's unbelievable that all of these guys, and even the second round wide receivers, went to so many great spots for fantasy. But I think if I were to choose for year 1, at the very least, Justin Jefferson is the guy that is going to fight Michael Pittman to me to have the best rookie wide receiver season in fantasy. And as far as guys in the first round, he, in my opinion, is definitely the guy that I want to take before all the other ones. So I think Justin Jefferson on a team that is probably going to throw the ball a lot more. You got to remember, Kevin Stefanski was the offensive coordinator for the last couple years in Minnesota. What was Kevin Stefanski's bread and butter? Running the football. So what did we see with Dalvin Cook? A breakout season. Now he goes to Cleveland. Everybody's in love with Kareem and Nick, as they should be. But the new offensive coordinator, they're probably going to, there's not as run heavy. They're going to throw the football a lot more. So Justin Jefferson, his opportunities are going to be there. And I think he is a guy, to me, if I'm in a dynasty draft, if I'm in a rookie draft, the first rookie wide receiver off the board for me is Justin Jefferson. And I think Michael Pittman has an argument there, but I don't think you can argue to take Pittman as the first rookie wide receiver because he's either going to go in the first 2 picks of the second round or the very back end of the first round. So you can wait on a guy like Michael Pittman and you could have your cake and eat it too. You get Jefferson and then you trade back into the first or use a late first that you might have on Michael Pittman and boom, boom. I think you've got the best 2 rookie wide receivers in fantasy for 2020. So to answer the question though, Justin Jefferson would be the guy out of the first round that I like the most in fantasy.
I do have kind of a little bit of a counter just in terms of Minnesota's proclivity to throw the ball more. So Mike Zimmer, as we recall, he's a bit of an old school coach, a bit of a curmudgeon. And a couple of years ago, there was that whole debate with DeFlippo that he ended up letting him go because they wanted to air the ball out a little bit more. So yeah. I do kind of have that little bit of concern that, Mike Zimmer's a good coach, don't get me wrong, but he is pretty stuck in his ways and Minnesota's better successes have come when they have put the ball on the ground a little bit more, except of course when they get into the playoffs and
yeah, and Gary Kubiak's the new offensive coordinator, so Gary Kubiak does like to run the football, but I think we're going to see – I don't think he's going to run it as much as Kevin did. I think it's going to be more in between what DeFilippo did and what Stefanski did. So I think you're going to see a little bit more of a healthy balance there. So I think the passing will be – there'll be a little bit uptick in the passing, but it's not – you're right, it's not going to be John DeFilippo. They're not going to be throwing the ball, all around like you're playing in the Big 12. So you're definitely right about that for sure.
No, and I'm glad you said Pittman because I'm super high on him just because I know Philip Rivers. I'm a Chargers fan.
Oh, yeah.
I know what he likes. He likes those big body receivers. Vincent Jackson. We had Alexander a couple of years ago, like a big tight end, Malcolm Floyd. So he loves those big-bodied receivers, and it's just going to remind him of the old days, and hopefully he doesn't throw a medicine ball. He goes back to a couple of years ago where he's actually throwing the ball well. But I'm super high on Pittman as well. So
Yeah, no, he's an amazing, and the more and more I look at the situation, the more and more I'm like, man, I mean, I think he probably finishes. I would take Jefferson first in rookie drafts, but I do think Michael Pittman ends the season with the best rookie wide receiver season. I do. He's got it all working for him. He's got the quarterback, okay? And I think Rivers is going to be a little more juiced up, a little more amped up because he's in a new system with a offensive genius in Frank Reich for the head coach for the Colts. So I think that he is going to be a little juiced up to really have one more blowout season. I think Phil Rivers is in for a pretty good year. I think the Colts offense is in good hands, good offensive line. Running game is in better hands now with Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack as opposed to just Marlon Mack. T.Y. Hilton is going to take pressure off of Michael Pittman, so Pittman's going to be in a lot of one-on-ones. Jack Doyle, I think, is going to be a buy low tight end as well, who's going to get some quality
those tight ends.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think we're going to see, in a way, I think you've got your big Mike Williams, you've got your Keenan Allen, and you've got your Hunter Henry, Antonio Gates. He's not, obviously Jack Doyle's not as athletic as Hunter Henry, but you know what I mean. Philip Rivers does love his tight end. So I think Michael Pittman is loads more talented. I don't even think they're in the same zip code as Big Mike Williams. I think Big Mike Williams is not nearly as talented as MPJ. So that's going to be something to watch too. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Michael Pittman Jr. is just, I think he is absolutely in a wonderful spot, and I'm so excited for his 2020 season.
Okay, so surmise on the wide receivers here. So in redraft, you're going with Jefferson or Pittman to have like the biggest year. In Dynasty, I didn't quite catch your answer. Was it still Jefferson?
It's still going to be Jefferson because in Dynasty drafts, you're going to be in rookie drafts. So, yeah, Justin is going to be the first rookie wide receiver off the board for me because I think he's in the best situation. I think he's going to have the second best rookie season, and he's going to go significantly higher for the most part than Michael Pittman will. I think Michael Pittman, the buzz is starting to drive up his ADP a little bit in rookie drafts. But regardless, most of the time he's not going to go ahead of Justin Jefferson. So get Justin Jefferson first, come back around and get Michael Pittman. Those are still the top two for me, just in reverse order in Dynasty drafts for sure, in rookie drafts for sure. But Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb and even Brandon Ayuk are right there. Ayuk is definitely in my top 5. T. Higgins is probably that 6th guy, I think, playing in Cincinnati. Going to get a lot of work on the outside across from A.J. Green. Not going to have a lot of, double teams. He's going to have a good quarterback in Joe Burrow throwing in the ball in a good offense with a good running back behind a revamped offensive line. He's got everything working for him too. Denzel Mims, I think a lot of people are excited about Denzel, but the problem with Denzel, we don't know how good the offense is going to be, number one. Adam Gase is the head coach, number 2. There is nobody in that receiver core that is going to scare defenses away from Denzel Mims. So he's going to face every team's their number 1 cornerback every week in and week out, and he's not a great polished route runner. So he, other than post and fly routes, he's going to have trouble breaking away from those number 1 wide receivers. So he's going to have to really evolve and season himself on the fly, and it's going to be difficult when there's not a whole lot of weapons on that offense. But yeah, those top 5, Ayuk in reverse order, Ayuk, Lamb, Jeudy, Jefferson, and Pittman, I'm in love with them. So I think they're all great options, to be honest.
I'll throw this out there too, even if just in a DFS play. I think Rager's kind of underrated in terms of like his blow-up potential on a week-to-week basis. So, just down the line, if, just looking at the schedule and there's a decent matchup,
for sure,
throw him out there. As far as going into the running back, so we only have the one first-round running back in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but there's several that are highly touted. Obviously, we have Dobbins in Baltimore. We have Jonathan Taylor out there in Indy. Like I mentioned, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And, I'm missing on a name.
There's DeAndre Swift and Cam Akers.
DeAndre Swift. There we go. So out of those guys, who are you looking at most in redraft? Because I know Jonathan Taylor and Clyde Edwards for a lot of people are 1-2 because a lot of people like that roster, that offensive line in Indy to give Jonathan Taylor that little bit of boost. Not big Marlon Mack fans out there. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you look at Andy Reid, his track record with running backs, whether it be Jamal Charles making Damian Williams look good or Kareem Hunt a couple years ago.
Yep.
It's always top 5 potential for him.
Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was my number 2 a couple weeks ago. And, of course, right after the draft. He has since slid down to number 3. I've got Akers at 4. I've got DeAndre Swift at 5. I've got Akers at 4. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 3. J.K. Dobbins at 2. And then I've got, Jonathan Taylor at 1. And that's not really for redraft. That's just more for rookie drafts, moving forward in the future. Jonathan Taylor's my number 1 guy. And, again, Indianapolis gets a second-round rookie. And at that position, he's my number 1 rookie player at that position off the board, redraft and dynasty league. So Jonathan Taylor, for me, I think is a lot of people are talking about Marlon Mack, and I get it. Marlon Mack he's not a bad running back, but you have to remember, here's the thing with Marlon Mack, folks. Marlon Mack does not catch passes. You want to know how many passes Marlon Mack caught last year? Anybody want to take a guess? You guys might already know, but you want to take a guess if you don't?
I could Google it. Nah. Oh, here we go. Oh, Yeah, that's an ugly number there. I don't know if you want to do the big reveal here, but
well, let me tell you this. Let me make it even worse. He was not even in the top, and Marlon Mack, as a feature running back, was not in the top 50 in targets or receptions. He had 14 catches last year. He does not catch the football. He is not a threat. That he is a one-dimensional football player. Jonathan Taylor didn't catch a whole lot of passes in Wisconsin, but his film indicates that he can do it when asked to do so. He's already a better and more dangerous pass catcher than Marlon Mack, and he's faster and he's bigger, he's stronger, he's faster, and he's more athletic. He is going to step in day one, in my opinion, and be that workhorse running back. This, to me, I think it could be more 60-40 Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack to start the season, but I think we're looking at 70-30, 80-20 between those two guys. Well, when we get like week 12, week 13. I think Nyheim Hines will be.
Yeah, I was just about to mention Nyheim Hines in there too. Like, he is a third element to this soup. I mean, you mentioned Marlon Mack's catch numbers. Nyheim Hines made it up though he was a viable PPR option for a lot of guys last year.
Exactly.
And if Taylor is still working on that element to his game, obviously, you mentioned that the tape shows he can do it. But in terms of his rookie year, is there any concern that Nyheim Hines will still have that third down role?
I think he will. I absolutely think he will. I think, and going back to a previous discussion we just had, Nyheim Hines is a guy late in drafts that I think people need to target, because I think Nyheim Hines is going to get plenty of pass catches. He'll catch more passes, I think, in 2020 than Jonathan Taylor will. My point with Jonathan Taylor was that he is going to saturate the market in that backfield, so to speak, in running the football, because Marlon Mack's only good at one thing, but Jonathan Taylor is exponentially better at that thing. And Nyheim Hines is the best in that backfield at the other thing. So you're going to see Jonathan Taylor, who's a good pass blocker, he's going to be in on those third downs when they have to protect Phillip Rivers and keep him upright, keep him healthy, right? Because they have that 1 year investment on him. So they're going to want to keep him upright and healthy. He's a better pass blocker than Hines and Mack. So he's going to be in on third down. So that, I think, is also going to be something that hurts Hines. But if they don't want their running back to go, into the flat and into a route, Jonathan Taylor's going to be that guy on third and fourth downs. If they do, if the play call indicates they will, Nyheim Hines will be that guy. It's not going to be Marlon Mack. But now we go back to the running the football. Marlon Mack's not going to be as involved. Jonathan Taylor's got that sewn up because he's so much better at that thing. So you're going to put your best player on the field. There's not going to be a whole lot for Marlon Mack this year. I think we just did a bet in FSA, a friendly bet, a $10 wager with a buddy of mine, where he thinks that Marlon Mack is a little underrated, that Marlon Mack's going to get 800 all-purpose yards. He's not going to get 800 all-purpose yards, in my opinion, because Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines are going to take up too much of running the ball and catching the ball with Hines. So I just don't see any allure or worry about Marlon Mack. So I think people are going to be disappointed if they're expecting Marlon Mack to have a quality season.
And if you've looked at the history of the NFL the last couple seasons, a rookie running back is either 1, 2, or 3 in total rushing yards. And this is why I'm so high on Jonathan Taylor. I think my hot take was right after the draft that he was going to be the rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year. He's going to be right there, top 5 at least in rushing yards because, 1, the offensive line is elite. 2, now you're having to worry about the pass because of Phillip Rivers. You have some decent weapons around him. You have 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. So you're actually going to have to worry about the pass now, which is going to open up those run lanes for Jonathan Taylor. So I'm high on him as well. I actually have him right now on our early rankings, him finishing 12 RB overall. So.
No, it wouldn't surprise me. And if you look at it, I actually posted something in FSA about this a couple years ago. Almost every year except one, I think. I'd have to find it. I'll see if I can find the exact post. But almost every year, a rookie running back has finished as an RB1. There is a pattern for that. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick. But there is a pattern there that you need to really try to find that rookie running back that's going to have that season, no matter who it is, and find them and sort of lock them up, because it's probably going to happen. There's a healthy pattern to that. And again, you don't really know who it's going to be. It might not be. Like, who knows? Kerryon Johnson goes down. Maybe it's DeAndre Swift. But I do think there is likely to be a running back in, that finishes in the top 12 as an RB1. And if I had to put my money on it, I would say it's Jonathan Taylor for sure. So I'd agree with you there.
2 questions at the quarterback position here. On the rookies, which one of those guys, for dynasty purposes, are you taking first, whether it be Burrow, Herbert, Tua, of course? And then second question to that, and you can't name Lamar Jackson, who's going to be that next second-year, third-year quarterback that's going to establish themselves as a perennial top 10 guy?
Oh, yeah. I like this question. Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones for the Giants. There are a couple options here, and I think eventually Joe Burrow is going to be one of those guys. I think he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's elite. I could go on about Joe Burrow for hours. But I do believe that Daniel Jones is going to be that quarterback this year, and I actually, I don't know if you guys know, I also have co-authored this year's Fantasy Black Book, and so you can find that on Amazon. It's the number one best-selling fantasy book on Amazon for like 13, 14 years in a row. So that'll be out, I think, in June, July.
Awesome
and
plug, by the way. Awesome.
And I had to, right? I had to.
He's flexing on us more, Aris. He's just, he's got this awesome setup. He's like,
if you guys can see this setup, he's making us all quit. Now he's flexing on us with the best-selling book. So
best-selling book on Amazon for like 30.
He did say Austin Eckler RB1, so we can just end it, and I'm happy.
But no, awesome book. So I check it out myself. So
yeah, and look, Daniel Jones finished last year as QB 24. He's a rookie, but we saw Danny Dimes do some great things week in and week out. Now, he did struggle with some turnovers. I get it. You got to fix that. But remember, Peyton Manning struggled with a ton of turnovers too. And Peyton Manning, there's a lot of similarities between Daniel Jones and Peyton Manning. And before everybody goes off the deep end when I say that, when I watched Daniel Jones tape about this time last year, even before this time last year, I told everybody, with his command in the huddle before the snap, he looks just like Peyton, controlling the line, commanding the line, calling the plays, maneuvering the offense around at the line. He's got the mannerisms of Peyton, and it shouldn't surprise anybody. Why? Because his mentor was David Cutcliffe, the Duke head coach, who was his head coach in college. And who did David Cutcliffe also mentor? Peyton and Eli. So it should not be a surprise to anybody that he does sort of imitate Peyton on the field. And so obviously Daniel Jones runs the football. So after the snap, he's not Peyton Manning. He's completely different.
Peyton Manning had an awesome touchdown against Dallas, all right?
He did.
Bootleg where nobody saw him. You faked out the cameraman, so we cannot snub his rushing prowess, all right?
That is true. That is true. Thank you for correcting me on that. But I do think, getting back to Daniel Jones, I do think that Daniel Jones is that guy. He has some of the best all-around weaponry in the NFL. Darius Slayton, who broke out as a rookie, I think he's tied for the rookie league lead in touchdowns last year. I'm a Darius Slayton truther. I'm in love with Darius Slayton. I think that he is a guy that could end the season as their unquestioned Batman receiver. You'll hear me say that on the RotoBros podcast all the time. The Batman receiver, what I mean by that, their number one guy, okay? Their alpha receiver. I think he has the ability to do that. Evan Ingram's healthy. If he can stay on the field, that'll be even better for Daniel Jones. Obviously, Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard are high-quality, highly productive wide receivers as well. The offensive line has been revamped. It should be improved. It's not going to be, the Indianapolis Colts more than likely, but they're working on it. They're getting things done. The defense should be better, so that's going to help the offense out a little bit more as well. Saquon Barkley. Need I say more? So he's got every piece around him to succeed. If Daniel Jones does not take a huge leap forward in year two, I think there's going to be cause for concern because I think that it'll be much like Baker Mayfield. A lot of people saw Baker Mayfield have this impressive rookie season. I was never a Baker Mayfield fan, and I warned everybody that he's just not a franchise quarterback, and everybody went off the deep end when I said the Browns were going to make the Super Bowl, were going to win the division or make the playoffs last year. Both of those things came to fruition. They were not a good team. Baker was terrible. New offense, run-heavy offense, maybe he improves, but I don't think he will. I don't think he is Cleveland's answer. If guys like Drew Lock and Daniel Jones, who are going into their second seasons this year and have everything around them looking great, there's not a weakness there for the most part. And so there's going to be a problem. It's going to be on them if they don't get it done. I think Daniel Jones is smart enough. Obviously, he was coached by David Cutcliffe. He's close with the Mannings. He's been mentored by them. He knows that stuff. Another thing I like that I think is going to go pretty much, I think it's going to be very an underrated fact. Last year, he had Eli breathing his neck, and I get it. Eli knew that Daniel Jones was the guy. They drafted him in the top 6 for a reason, but they knew that Daniel Jones was the guy. So did Daniel. But when you have a veteran who has been the face of that franchise, okay, for years in the locker room, that can make you a little nervous. At any moment, you could get pulled so that the team could bring in, the folk hero. That's not the case anymore. He's gone. This is Daniel's team. He is the leader. There is no worry about a quarterback behind you. He is the guy. So it's all on him. He's got it all working for him. I think Daniel Jones, I've got him finishing his QB 12, obviously on the edge there. I think he's going to take a huge step forward. I think he is going to be a guy that a lot of people can rely on this year. I love getting getting him as my QB1 in one quarterback leagues late, and I love getting him a little bit earlier on than most people would be willing to draft him in Superflex. So I'm happy. I'm all in on him, but I think he is a guy that is definitely going to take a huge step forward and be, a top 12, maybe even top 10 quarterback in 2020.
Well, I have no problems or issues with that take. What's going to be the big difference maker for Daniel Jones, of course, is he can definitely take advantage of a bad matchup. If you look at some of his games against the worst pass defenses in the league, like 40, 50-point games almost. Insane, like the week winners right there. Now, if he could do that against some good teams, obviously that's going to be where the difference lies. If he stops being a more matchup-based play. It's funny, though. I'm glad that you mentioned the Baker Mayfield hot takes because, one of the beautiful things about podcasting or being on radio or at least having your tapes there, sure, sometimes you'll get on old takes exposed, but I can proudly say that when we were doing our mock draft last year, I didn't buy into the Baker Mayfield hype, and voila, it worked out the way it did.
Yes.
Because I just looked at him and I'm like, are we really drafting him in the same range that we're talking about guys like Patty Mahomes or we're talking about Aaron Rodgers? It was
unreal.
He was going in like the fourth round last year.
Yeah, his ADP was just ridiculous compared to like what the results ended up being. Though you got to be careful now, though. Again, old takes exposed. This is how you get a Mel Kiper take out there. This is how you – we're going to have it out there. Chris McConnell compares Daniel Jones to Peyton Manning. This is going to be like David Gettleman Award right here. Touched by the hand of God or walking around at the Super Bowl. That man's a quarterback right there.
If he doesn't have 56 touchdowns this year, I'm going to be mad as can be.
I know. God, I would let you guys down if he had 49 touchdowns. It's unbelievable. And look, another thing about David Jones, kidding aside, another thing people got to remember about Daniel Jones, he's got a high floor. Why? Because he can run the football. He's not Phillip Rivers. He's not a statue in the pocket. Some of those guys can be QB1s and everything like that. But in fantasy, if you have a high floor like that and if things break down, you can make some stuff happen. Daniel Jones is 6'5". The guy can really move for his size, and that's valuable. In this new age NFL, where you typically have a lot more room when things do break down to run around and make something happen, Daniel Jones can do it. So that's another thing people need to realize. He's an underrated guy. I think another quick name, I won't get too far into it, but another underrated guy, Matthew Stafford, I think could really, he was a QB1 before he got hurt last year. Keep an eye on Matthew Stafford. If you can get him as your QB1 in one QB leagues or your number 2 quarterback in 2 QB leagues, I just did that in a Dynasty league the other day. I would highly recommend it. He's going to have an excellent, excellent season.
So we're going to switch gears going from QB to tight ends. How do you go about your tight ends? My personal favorite strategy is I try to get 2 tight ends. I try to run 2 tight ends or at least have 2 decent tight ends on my roster. So that way, bye weeks or injury, I'm not scrounging for, some no-name tight end who's going to be streaming that week. So how do you go about tight ends?
Tight ends, obviously it depends on the league. If it's a tight end premium league, you're going to want to take a tight end generally a lot earlier, at least your first tight end. But for the most part, tight ends for me, what I'm trying to do is I am trying to find those guys that, much like those running backs, I want volume. I want opportunity. I am trying to look for those guys that are going to get that. Okay. And I think there are a lot of guys that really, have the opportunity this year to really break out and have a lot of that volume, that passing volume. And so a couple of those guys that I love, and I actually tweeted about it a little earlier as well, a couple of those guys that I love, TJ Hawkinson, I think he was the best tight end prospect coming out in the last 10 years, to be honest with you. Obviously, he got hurt. The season didn't go the way he wanted to. So it was Matthew Stafford got hurt, so that didn't help matters. But I do think that TJ Hawkinson is in. He's too good not to break out, in my opinion. I think he's going to have a great year. Hayden Hurst for the Falcons didn't quite break out like everybody wanted him to. First round tight end drafted by the Ravens. Obviously, he struggled with injuries. Mark Andrews came in, stole the spotlight. Hayden really never got his shot. He was in a 3 tight end committee with Mark and Nick Boyle out there. Blake Jarwin is one that I really liked a lot more the draft. I still like him, but I liked him a lot more before the draft because now he's got CeeDee Lamb there. So that's another quality body along with Amari and Michael Gallup and all that. They gave him starter tight end money, and I was jumping for joy because I was like, #free Blake Jarwin. But unfortunately, they took Amari Cooper. So that put some, rain on the parade a little bit. But the guy that I love this year, guys, he's going to get a ton of the work. And I know a lot of people are worried, Green Bay doesn't throw the football to tight ends that much. I don't think they're going to have a choice this year after not attacking the wide receiver 2 position in the draft. They're not going to have a choice. Jay Sternberger is going to be this year's Darren Waller, that breakout tight end for 2020. Jay Sternberger above everybody for the Packers. So, again, those are guys that I'm targeting based on volume. Blake's volume is going to go down, so I'm not as high on him as I once was, but certainly Jay Sternberger, TJ Hawkinson, and Hayden Hurst. Another guy, Mike Gesicki. I love Preston Williams. Devontae Parker's still there. Brady's going to get some catches out of the backfield, but I do think that Mike Gesicki is a tight end that's starting to we started to see him come into his own. You know, tight ends typically have that first year, that rookie year learning curve, so you don't really see them break out a lot in year one. But not only that, but Mike Gesicki's got a better quarterback now with Tua Tagovailoa. So whenever he sees the field and gets those snaps, that's going to be good for Mike. So these are all guys that I think in one tight end leagues, you don't have to feel pressure to get a Kelsey. You don't have to go get Ertz. Kittle, I think you always want to get if you can target him, but don't get Darren Waller. I would fade Darren Waller hard this year. But wait on tight end. Get these guys super late, and we talked about late rounds earlier. These are guys you can get in those late rounds who are going to get a lot of volume. You can get 2 of these guys back-to-back rounds, and now you've got 2 guys whose situations are very good. They're going to get a ton of volume. We saw what Austin Hooper did last year in the Falcons, right? Well, Hayden Hurst is a bigger, stronger, faster version of Austin Hooper, and there's nobody on that at that position on that offense that's going to get the tight end volume. So Hayden Hurst is going to have every opportunity to really break out. So these are guys that I'm really targeting. So Jason Hayden really above everybody, but TJ and Blake are not far behind, as is Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. As far as tight end goes, yes, you can definitely get those guys in the later rounds. It really just depends on you as a manager, like how dedicated you want to be to the week-to-week minutia of finding the waiver wire, getting that guy, looking at the matchups, finding whoever is playing the Arizona Cardinals that week, because that seemed to be the go-to matchup for anyone playing a tight end in fantasy. We want to be respectful of your time, Chris, so I'm just going to throw out some couple rapid-fire questions here for you. First one, big controversial one in the fantasy community. Kickers, nix them or no?
I would probably, for the most part, nix them. I think a lot of people, real quick expansion on that question, a lot of people have, what they've started to do is actually, you allow kickers, but if you draft a kicker to make it a little more valuable, the first person to draft a kicker gets like a better draft pick in the rookie or something like that. I can't remember exactly what they're doing. I'm not in a league like that, but they're spicing it up if you allow kickers. For me, though, if I'm starting a Dynasty league, I'm going to nix the kickers.
I'm with you
Add
there.
Punters. Add punters.
No, get out of here. I'm with you on there. Traditionalist, be damned. I'm sorry, but for you as a fantasy analyst, how much actual time do you commit to ranking kickers? Let's be real.
0.
Exactly. All right.
I want dome kickers on good offenses. There you go.
Next question. We're going to bring out some nostalgia here. Do you remember your very first fantasy pick? Because for me, Frank Gore, 2006, helped my dad win his league that year. You?
My first pick, Adrian Peterson. True story. It was my first. I had the third overall pick. It was the first league, the 16-team Dynasty League. Third overall pick, Adrian Peterson. So very, very proud to be able to say that. So Adrian Peterson was my very first pick. And I took over a team that had LaDainian Tomlinson on it. So those were my top 2 running backs for like 4 or 5 years. It was insane. I got lucky. That was luck. But Adrian Peterson, obviously, he was a no-brainer pick at third overall.
Wow. Aris, real quick, do you remember your very first pick?
I think it was Lev Bell the year he tore his ACL.
Oh, so
I just never had it's not, my history isn't as deep. It's just once I got into it, I really got into it. But I think it was Lev Bell a couple years ago when he tore his ACL. I think it was 4 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, man, not all stories are dream scenarios.
No, this was the first year my first round pick finished the year. I had David Johnson the year he dislocated his wrist. Lev Bell, first round pick's not good for me.
You got thrown to the wolves earlier on in your fantasy career, right?
Yeah, and then this year I was gifted Christian McCaffrey, so at least I was happy about that.
Oh, there you go. Okay, that makes up for it.
Teach you how to use the waiver wire, that's for sure. And then a Slumpbuster traditional here. Favorite all-time sports movie?
Favorite all-time sports movie? Okay, because the best to me and the favorite are different. You said favorite. Man, it's Varsity Blues, baby. Varsity Blues all day long. Whipped cream bikini. I don't want your life. The teacher who's the stripper. Billy Bob. Come on. It's got to be Varsity Blues.
All right.
Okay, now what's your best? Since you differentiated it there, what's the best in your opinion?
You guys could probably guess. Remember the Titans.
Nah, that's Remember the Titans. I think that's 4 out of the last 5 podcasts that Remember Titans is one. We've heard Rocky. Yeah. We've heard Rudy on here before, too. I know I always go with Major League as my go-to.
That's a good one.
Great characters. I can watch it any day of the week. All right, Chris, RotoBros, tell the people, where can they listen to you? Where can they absorb the wealth of fantasy knowledge that you have? And definitely catch up on all these rookie wide receivers and rookie running backs, because that's going to be big coming into this year.
Yeah, so you can find us on podbean.com. That's where we host the podcast. But you can find us on all major podcast platforms: Stitcher, Google Play Music, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that, Spotify as well. We're on all the major platforms. Name it, we're on it. So definitely check that out. And it's a different podcast experience for fantasy football, because what's interesting is me and my partner, Mark Wimpkin, it's a different experience because Mark is a guy that lives and dies by the analytics. He lives and dies by the data. That's not me. I'm more of the film guy. I'm going to look at the situation a little bit more. I'm going to look at the trends a little bit more. And he's going to live and die by the data. So we really do see the game, not just fantasy, but the game as a whole through two different lenses. So there's a lot of disagreeing on the show. And we do give you a lot of data, again, from two different perspectives. So you're going to get that. So it's a little bit, it's not some sort of tea party that you're going to listen to. It's not the boring, we agree on everything. There's definitely some controversy in there. We've gotten into it a few times. So it's definitely exciting, but the knowledge and the data and everything that you're going to get from the RotoBros podcast, you will not regret it. So definitely check us out. We'd really appreciate it. And again, before the season starts, before your rookie drafts kick off, if they haven't already, go check out some of my scouting briefs. The entire scouting brief series is on Podbean and on all of those podcast streaming platforms. You can listen to every one of them: quarterback, running back, wide receiver. Well, all the big prospects are in there. So definitely check those out. It's definitely a wealth of knowledge. And hey, you guys can also find me on Twitter at CMAC_FFB. So definitely check it out there, because I do tweet out some of the shows as well and things of that nature. Definitely you can find me on several other platforms as well. But yeah, check out the podcast, the RotoBros Fantasy Football Podcast. You will not regret it for sure.
Definitely won't. All right. And shout out to the walking stat sheet, as you call him, as well. All right, guys. Well, you know where to find us: at Slumpbuster Podcast, at SlumpbusterPod on Twitter. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Promo code SLUMP to get 20% off at manscaped.com. Find us on all major streaming platforms. Stay safe, happy, and healthy, and we'll see you next week.